Emma had always lived a quiet, predictable life in her small Massachusetts town, enjoying her cozy home, her work at the local library, and the slow rhythm of her days, yet she never imagined that one autumn afternoon would shake her world completely. It started at the town's fall festival, where the streets were lined with orange and gold leaves, the smell of cinnamon and roasted nuts in the air, and children's laughter echoing off the wooden stalls. Emma was browsing through a small booth of handmade scarves when she saw him, a young man with an easy smile and eyes that seemed impossibly familiar. She froze, her heart skipping a beat, because he strongly resembled someone she had thought she would never see again, her late husband, David. And not just in his features, though his eyes, jawline, and even the curve of his lips mirrored David perfectly, but in the small, subtle ways he carried himself. The tilt of his head when he listened, the quiet, thoughtful laugh, the way his hands moved when he spoke. Emma blinked rapidly, unsure if this was reality or some strange trick of memory, but the longer she looked at him, the more undeniable it became. There was no mistaking it. She felt a sudden rush of conflicting emotions, nostalgia, sorrow, longing, and a strange flutter of curiosity that she hadn't felt in years. She wanted to look away, to dismiss him as just someone who happened to look like David, yet something inside her urged her to stay. His name was Liam, and when he spoke, his voice carried warmth, a casual kindness that reminded her so deeply of her husband that she almost wanted to cry. She forced herself to step back, telling herself that she couldn't possibly be drawn to a stranger merely because he resembled someone she had loved, but every instinct in her body pulled her closer. As she tried to collect her thoughts, Liam smiled politely, holding out his hand in greeting, and she noticed the familiar way he held himself, relaxed but attentive, as if he were listening not just to her words, but to her unspoken feelings. Emma felt her pulse quicken, a mixture of excitement and fear surging through her chest because she hadn't realized how deeply she had missed the kind of connection David had given her until now. Memories of the past came flooding back. Quiet evenings by the fireplace, soft laughter over shared jokes, the way David had always seemed to know what she needed without her saying a word. But Liam was not David, she reminded herself firmly, even as the comparison felt almost cruel. He was a stranger, a young man who had no place in the quiet life she had built after loss. Yet the resemblance was too strong to ignore, and as they exchanged a few polite words, Emma felt herself drawn into a conversation that seemed to flow effortlessly, as though the universe had orchestrated this encounter for reasons she could not yet understand. She noted the way he looked at her, attentive and patient, not rushing the moment, and it made her heart ache with a longing she hadn't realized was still alive. The festival continued around them, children running past with painted faces, the scent of sweet treats filling the air, and for a fleeting moment, it felt like time had paused, holding them suspended in a bubble where only the two of them existed. Emma's mind raced with questions she didn't dare ask. Why did he remind her so strongly of David? How much of this feeling was memory? And how much was the undeniable charm of the man standing before her? She felt a wave of guilt mingled with curiosity. Was it fair to herself or to Liam to feel drawn to him simply because he mirrored someone she had lost? As they parted that afternoon, exchanging smiles tinged with something unspoken, Emma walked away with her heart heavy and her mind spinning, knowing that she could not ignore this encounter. She sensed that this meeting was the beginning of something that would challenge the carefully constructed boundaries of her life, something that would force her to confront feelings she thought she had buried forever. The air around her seemed charged with a strange energy, the kind that tells you a story is about to change direction, the kind that makes the mundane suddenly feel extraordinary. Emma tried to return to her routines, to immerse herself in the comfort of familiar work and familiar streets, but Liam's presence lingered in her thoughts like a shadow she could not shake. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, recalling the curve of his smile, the tilt of his head, the echo of David's warmth in his eyes, and she realized that her life, once predictable and quiet, had been quietly upended by a single encounter. She understood, with a mix of fear and hope, that this resemblance was more than coincidence. It was a spark that would draw her into uncharted emotional territory, a connection that demanded exploration even as it terrified her. Emma did not know where this path would lead, only that her heart had recognized something in Liam before her mind could even make sense of it, and that recognition carried with it both a promise and a peril she could not yet name. And so, the story of longing, of reflection, of the delicate tension between past and present began, not with a declaration or a confession, but with a glance, a smile, and the uncanny familiarity of a man who strongly resembled the love she had lost. After that first startling encounter, Emma couldn't get Liam out of her mind. Every corner of her quiet Massachusetts life seemed to whisper his presence, from the sound of laughter in the library to the way the autumn wind rustled the golden leaves outside her window, and even the scent of cinnamon and roasted nuts at the local cafe reminded her of the festival where she had first seen him. She told herself it was only memory, only longing for David manifesting as confusion. But the truth was undeniable. Liam's presence stirred feelings she hadn't experienced in years. Over the next few weeks, she began seeing him more often at the market, on walks through the park, even occasionally in the cozy little cafe where she liked to sit with a book and a cup of tea, and every meeting felt electric, each smile and casual word pulling her deeper into an emotional current she didn't know how to resist. Liam was gentle and unassuming, never forcing attention, but quietly making himself part of her life, listening to her stories and sharing his own with a warmth that reminded her of David, yet was distinctly his own. One afternoon, as the leaves turned deep shades of red and gold, Emma found herself walking beside Liam along the winding path of the town's old park, the sun low in the sky, casting long shadows and bathing everything in a soft glow, and she noticed the way he listened so intently, his eyes meeting hers with a depth that made her chest ache with both nostalgia and longing. She realized that she was drawn not just to his resemblance to her husband, but to who he was. His kindness, his thoughtfulness, the small, careful ways he showed he cared. But alongside the warmth came a storm of guilt and fear. Emma knew she was risking her heart by feeling anything beyond friendship, by letting herself remember David in Liam's face and laugh, yet she couldn't stop the pull, couldn't ignore the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, life was offering her a second chance at connection, a chance to heal in a way she hadn't thought possible. Their conversations grew longer and more intimate, shifting from polite talk to shared dreams and private memories, and Emma found herself laughing more freely than she had in years, feeling a lightness she hadn't realized she had missed. Liam spoke of his own struggles, of moments of loneliness, of small triumphs and quiet disappointments, and in those moments Emma felt a deep empathy, a desire to comfort him and share herself with him, even as the resemblance to David hovered like a delicate shadow between them, adding both comfort and complication. One chilly evening, as they sat on a bench beneath the park's old oak trees, the ground covered in fallen leaves and the air crisp with the scent of coming winter, Emma caught herself staring at him, tracing the lines of his face, the familiar curve of his jaw, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, and a wave of emotion hit her like a sudden gust of wind. Sorrow for what she had lost, desire for what she could have, and fear for what her heart was risking. Liam noticed her gaze, and without saying a word, reached out to touch her hand lightly, a gesture so gentle it felt like a question and an answer all at once. And Emma felt her pulse quicken, the mix of longing and hesitation almost overwhelming. She knew she should step back, remind herself that he was a different person, that she owed loyalty to the memory of her husband and to her own boundaries, yet every fiber of her being resisted. She wanted to lean in, to speak, to confess the tumult of emotions that had grown so strong in such a short time, but the words caught in her throat, leaving only the silent electricity of shared presence. Over the following days, Emma became acutely aware of how her routine had subtly shifted. She found excuses to visit the cafe at the same time Liam would be there, lingered at the park paths where he walked, and caught herself imagining conversations, imagining touches, imagining moments that might never come. And yet each thought was tempered by caution, by the knowledge that life was fragile, that her heart had been broken once, and that allowing herself to fall too quickly could lead to pain she wasn't sure she could bear again. Liam, for his part, never pressured her. He offered his company like a soft, steady light, his words measured and kind, his presence comforting without overwhelming. And Emma realized that part of why she was drawn to him was not just the resemblance to David, but the quiet respect he showed her, the patience he embodied, and the way he seemed to understand her without needing explanations. One evening, as a gentle drizzle began to fall and the street lamps cast a warm glow over wet pavement, they walked together in silence, the only sounds the tapping of raindrops and the distant laughter of children playing in puddles, and Emma felt a strange mixture of peace and tension. She wanted to reach out, to hold his hand and close the distance between them, yet the memory of David and the caution of her own heart held her back, leaving the tension suspended like a breath neither of them dared to exhale. By the time they parted, the drizzle had turned to a steady rain, and Emma walked home with her coat wrapped tightly around her, heart racing and mind swirling, realizing that Liam had become more than a passing resemblance to someone she loved. He had become a living, breathing presence in her life, a challenge to her emotions, a mirror to her past, and a possibility for her future. She understood that what she felt was complicated, impossible to define simply as friendship or longing. And yet, the pull between them was undeniable, a magnetic force neither could ignore. That night, lying awake in her quiet bedroom, she thought about the warmth of his hand, the softness in his voice, the way he had made her laugh and feel seen, and felt a spark of hope and fear intertwined in her chest, knowing that the story that had begun with a single glance at the festival was far from over, that the weeks ahead would challenge her heart, her memories, and her ability to trust herself with someone new. Yet she also knew that no matter the risk, she could not walk away from the connection forming between them, a connection that promised joy and pain, remembrance and renewal, and a chance to open her heart again in ways she had thought impossible after loss.